Okay, so I'm again sitting here with Kishan, and we are collaborating in the context of slowly beginning to work together to design an ecology of practices, which can serve by means of a cultural response to the metacrisis and meaning crisis. And Kishan, for me, has been a wonderful collaborator in that project for a long time now. And in that context, part of this ecology of practices that we're putting together has to do with building a relationship with the soul. So the topic of ensoulment or re-ensoulment, the idea being that our way of life has become deeply profaned, uh, along with the disenchanting of the world. So the way that we're mistreating the world is sort of equivalent to the way that we're mistreating our own souls, such as, for example, by not even recognizing that we have souls or caring for them appropriately. And so this is obviously also in a Jungian context, sort of building an active relationship with, for me, for example, the feminine principle within oneself, the anima or the soul, um, as a way to, yeah, you could say access the divine within or the higher self, is it in Jungian terms. And what I wanted to talk about with Kishan was this association between the soul and the source of aliveness or the source of life in the context of artistic practice. And so, Kishan, I'm trying to work out how to frame my initial question. Would you like to say something about what it is that you do? Like what kind of practices you like, or how you identify as an artist or other kind of creator?
So let's start with the latter. Actually, how I identify as an artist is more of always been a embodied practice for me, uh, conjoined with my upbringing, coming from a yogic upbringing. My father's a yoga teacher, and growing up in the tropical rainforest, I was always connected to nature, to aliveness, to life itself, being in contact with the energy of the land, the beauty of it, how it inspires me, how my dreams inspires me, being connected to the environment. And so for me, it's always been quite more of a observational practice of how much do I see, how much do I actually notice, and let that inspire to bring together all of these visual stimulations, these sensations into these feelings, visual stories, um, and any kinds of tactilities and textures that it can really be this an embodied being.
Mm,
And for me, it's always been quite spiritual and meditative for me, um, to also kind of like let go of um, I guess making it always about me, about myself. But I could then allow myself to be whole with nature. I could allow myself to be changed and inspired and to adapt. Um, and then coming to the first question, what is it that I do is combining all of these practices, the yogic, the being connected to the land. My mom also does Tai Chi. I also combine Tai Chi and some Zen into the movement at which I draw. Um, did I miss anything? Did you?
yeah, well, I want to like maybe this is the moment to, would you be so kind as to show some of the artwork that you've made? Um, like, I guess
Yeah.
to me, Kishan is a wonderful example of someone who not only practices what he preaches, but who is running an entire ecology of practices in his life. And for this reason, is able to, in a sense, represent the philosophy that I'm speaking to. So you can see how Kishan is naturally like creating not only amazing visual artwork, but has many, many practices involving embodiment, dialogue practices, visualization practices, practices involving imagination, right? That are like meditation and contemplation practices. And this kind of amazing artwork is the direct result of that. And you can clearly see as well, as I just literally like holding Jung's eye on and in the middle of the chapter about Gnostic symbols of the self, this is a mandalic structure, right? It's a symbol of our wholeness or in a sense our complete nature. And artwork like this, at least in the Jungian sort of tradition, right, captures our wholeness, the essence of who we are, our true self in a way, and gives expression to that in sometimes in a way that our sort of public facing persona doesn't necessarily allow. And so what I'm really interested in is creating this kind of artwork and running this kind of ecology of practices in group contexts, right? So can you imagine an ecology of practices where each of the individuals is encouraged to get in touch with the perspective which is most uniquely them. So what I'm talking about is coming from the perspective of the soul, coming from out of the perspective of the soul. So as we strip away these different layers of our identity, we start to unlock more of our unique essence, who we truly are, which is also the source of our aliveness, right? The source of um, spontaneity in the in the, I think Chinese tradition or Zen tradition. This is like Wu Wei. It's the place from which effortless effort flows, action without needing to do anything. It's that kind of space of spontaneity that Kishan is accessing when he's creating his artwork, or when they are creating their artwork. Excuse me. And I just to say, like, imagine doing that in a group context, right? Like, imagine getting a whole group of people together and practicing an ecology of practices involving dance and song, and as I said, dialogue practices, applied philosophy practices, meditation practices, contemplation practices, and artwork, right? Creating artwork together. And what's important about that, from my point of view, is that it allows us to access the perspective of the soul such that something can be born through us, something can be conveyed, or there are certain emergent properties that come about as a result of embodying the perspective of the soul. And Kishan spoke to that directly when they spoke of the spiritual quality. And so, Kishan, I want to ask you about that before I go on speaking for too long. When you're talking about your practices and your artistic work, you mentioned that it's deeply spiritual to you. We could also talk about the subtle
Yeah.
body in this context as well. But what does it mean to you for it to be spiritual? Why is it spiritual? And yeah, I just invite you to reflect on that relationship between coming from the soul, so to speak, coming from out of the soul, and what's spiritual about that, or how the perspective of the soul allows you to access that which you're deeply connected to spiritually.
It all starts with what does it even mean to be spiritual? What does spiritual even mean? For my practice in the majority of my life, I'd say that it's not as much uh, a concept that occurred in my mind to define, but merely, and instead, I would say anything can be spiritual if it's deeply lived, soul lived, and I would say it's found in the most profoundness of simplicities and mundaneness that some people go years searching for spirituality or enlightenment or meaning, and often it can be as silly as stripping all meaning away to actually find a sense of depth and in that simplicity. And when coming back to my roots, where I come um, from this warm tropical country in Suriname, most people live quite in much simplicity and prosperity. And also, connecting to my African lineage, um, it's also When we think about animism as a practice or a way of being, they don't as much have a perception of what is spiritual. They just are, they just be. And that 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 being is so fully lived. And I think that is the thing that makes us connect to soul and everything around us that is already soul filled, without
Mm,
having to conceptually understand it.
mm,
Also in Hinduism, they talk about when you stop intellectually understand soul and spirit is actually the moment that you can and invoke it and
mm,
let it pass through you and move you.
mm, mm. Well, that was beautifully said. And like, there's a couple of qualities there that I sort of hear you invoking. You're talking about ensoulment as a way of life. It's not like it produces certain objects or it's a thing that can be defined. It's not that kind of thing. It's more like a mode of being. It's more like a way of conducting life, a way of flowing through life. What I might talk about
Yes,
here is the way that when you're coming from that certain perspective, when you're in that mode of being, there's a quality of much deeper connectedness to the world. Is a quality of being bound to the world, binding in the sense of yoga, yoke, the bond, the connection. That deep bond, that deep link is present, where it seems to me like what strikes me is this quality that you have of being able to really receive deeply, to take in what's happening as it's happening. And so the way that you go through life is far less at a shallow level, right? Far less surface level, and therefore far less consumptive, far less fragmented, far more in touch with wholeness within. So when we're talking about the perspective of the soul, if to put it that way, it's not like exactly something that can be intellectually defined. It's not that kind of thing. You're talking about a practice, meaning a way of life, and by participating in that way of life, one can get an embodied sense, right, for what it means to come from out of the soul, so to speak. Does that resonate?
yes, very much so.
Yeah, yeah,
Very much
wonderful.
so. And perhaps also additionally, I can say is when, let's say, quote unquote, trying to capture soul, it's not about accurately trying to capture soul, but more allow it, um, as it passes through you, to let it inspire and from your own uniqueness, um, interpret that that feeling,
Hmm.
that emergence, rather than to, let's say, photographically capture it, because I believe that that's near to impossible, but perhaps quite similar to, um, many artists who deeply connect and create in this way. And you also said beautifully, to to become less consumptive. It's a healthy, very healthy way of being, because if you only ever, let's say, consume, then you can never truly find the deepness inside of yourself or in anything else. And it's I wanna also add to that, um it's also a training, a practice that you can, um, lean more into when creating, that it truly rewires you how you perceive.
Mm, mm. Yeah, so the connection for me here is in the in the Judeo-Christian tradition, they sort of talk about embodying the perfect man or the perfect
Mm,
person. So it's like imitation of Christ as the way to embody God. And in the text I'm reading at the moment, that's sort of equivalent to developing a relationship with the rational soul. So developing a relationship with the rational soul is that quality of life that allows us to more perfectly embody Christ in the Christian tradition. And what's implied there is, as you were just saying, it's a quality of it's a still developing relation. It's not about attaining a state of final completeness. It's not about getting somewhere or becoming, so to speak, perfect. It's more about incorporating. I mean, I've talked about this as a combination of being, doing, and becoming, right? And we're talking about the becoming part. When we're connected with, let's say, God or with spirit or however you want to call that, and embodying perfection in that way, when we're allowing the divine to flow through us, so to speak, we're still becoming. We're still becoming because we're beings that are evolving and developing
mm,
in real time. And for
mm,
me, I mean, just to say, you we were talking about soul work in the context of artistic practice and meditation and embodiment work. And I just want to mention, like, for me, like, yes to all of that, which is why I'm training in and directly facilitating those kinds of practices and working with people who also facilitate those kinds of practices because it's relevant to soul work. But for me, in the following from Jung, Henry Corbin, John Vervaeke, and others, it's about also developing an explicit relationship with the soul. And so I have a kind of ongoing dialogue with a personified figure who I take to be my own soul, among other characters. This is in the Greek tradition of the daimonion, or it's called the Divine Double by Charles Stang. Um, and so I just want to mention that it's really like in the sense of the traditional academy, it's a combination of all the different faculties that are available to us, including our reason, right? So there's a perfect marriage here. What I'm talking about is that there's a perfect marriage between our reason and soul work, if you like. It's not something that is um, phobic of rationality, so to speak. I wonder how that resonates with you.
yeah. I I really like the part where you said like divine no in the marriage. Sorry, that's one part. Like you mentioned the marriage and yeah, you're a divine doppelganger.
Yeah, the divine
Yeah,
doppelganger. That's
I
good. That's a
really
good one. What did I say about marriage? Do you remember?
mm, something around the context of like the perfect union or when they marry the reason and the soul.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is a very Platonic notion of the complete interpenetration of love and reason, and this is also in the Christian tradition, right through the marriage of Christ and the Church. This is depicted in the myth of the Hieros Gamos, the mystical marriage or divine union.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and here, this is like this marriage between the perfect person who's represented as Christ, right, or the Buddha, or take your representation of choice, and the soul, which is different. And so we're sort of talking about the relationship between those two figures, if you like, that which is perfect about us, or that which is whole about us, the totality of who we are. Can we allow that to come more into the world by developing a relationship with the soul? And that invokes a kind of a marriage process, right? It's a dialectical process. Does that make sense?
Ongoing,
Yeah,
ongoing,
ongoing. Yeah.
ongoing. Yeah, yeah, I do resonate with that. Very much so. I recognize myself in it. Although, concerning the part of perfection, uh, I stumbled upon something quite interesting, and that's because for me, let's say my let's say when I deeply became more intact or in contact with my soul, it is indeed like this feeling of divine union and almost perfection and wholeness. And still, it's quite a humbling experience when this divine force flows through us, when this perfection, this dialogue flows through us. Humbling because not only is it ongoing, but I also deeply, deeply see the beautiful imperfection, actually, because you
Mm,
keep mentioning perfection, but I actually feel more human, oddly,
mm,
at being more connected to soul and allowing this imperfection, allowing this consistent growth and allowing consistent change and to allow myself to be changed when necessary.
mm. Yeah, that resonates with me very much. It's like it's it's not so much about the pursuit of perfection, so much as allowing that which hasn't been spoken to speak itself through us, which you could understand, I think, as a as an expression of wholeness or totality, which is different than perfection. And our limitations, our humanness, our smallness, is key to that. It's our humanness is that which grounds us and which binds us to this world, which is a really core part of who we are, right? So yeah, that connects with me very much. Um, I feel like this is kind of where I wanted to take the dialogue, and I want to keep it as a short one. So I want to invite you, like, as we end here, I want to reference a couple of texts that have really helped me on this topic, and but I want to invite you as well to, if you would care to share any more of your artwork or present anything else while we're right here. I really appreciate you sharing what
Yeah,
you've
already
created
checking
because
around my room.
yeah. I mean, you don't have to, but we got only a couple of glimpses of the amazing artistic creations that you've been able to create, which for me is just like it's really miraculous and I'm really this is not my forte at all, which is why I collaborate with people who have different strengths, right? Um, but yeah, while I'm mentioning yeah, sort of a couple of texts, namely Personification by John Rowan. So this is like in the tradition of sort of using the dialogical self in psychotherapy and counseling. This is about like how to develop the kinds of relationships with you could say beings or you could say parts of yourself in the sense of internal family systems, like developing relationships with these different parts of yourself or different daimons or the soul itself. This is like very much um, the direction, it seems to me. And so this text is very helpful. These are both from Viveki, if anyone's following along in the background. And Jeffrey Raff, The Practice of Ally Work, which is kind of in the same kind of vein, meeting and partnering with your spirit guide in the imaginal world. So again, this is kind of following from the French scholar Henry Corbin and his interpretations of Sufism. Um, about deeply involving the imagination and what he calls the imaginal world. So inhabiting the world, being in the world in an imaginal way, it's kind of equivalent to re-ensoulment. So the idea being when we can access this perspective of the soul and not only create a dialogical relationship with the soul, but take up the soul as a perspective. Well, what kind of world do we then inhabit? How does the world present itself to the point of view of the soul? And the idea is it appears in a way which is re-enchanted. It appears in a way which is ensouled, the re-ensoulment of the world, called by, like roughly speaking, that is the imaginal world, as I'm understanding it, Corbin's imaginal world. I know that was a lot, so piece by piece, I'm gonna get all of this out of my brain and somewhere. So, is there anything more that you wanted to share, Kishan? either
I
visually or
can
in words or anything else?
I can visually. Hold on. Oh, I'm so short.
Whoa.
Yes, this one.
Wow. Kishan, how long did this take to create?
Oh, this is a very questionable process. Uh, I did like 2 weeks of 5 doses of acid.
Ah,
um, so I hyper focused. I just continued drawing for 2 weeks straight. I did sleep in between. I did,
hmm. Wow.
but this is I think the briefest that I've ever taken on a big drawing.
Wow.
All right, all right, all right.
Yeah, I mean, we can just sort of come out of the closet if you like with psychedelics as well. I mean, I was just talking about
Oh,
microdosing and going to ecstatic
oops,
dance before we hit the record. Um,
oops.
Microdosing mushrooms is a wonderful way of enhancing an ecstatic dance. So yeah, that's an important, so you could say embodiment practice for me, but like, yeah. Yeah, so wow, I mean, sort of to summarize, what we've been talking about is sort of different components or different elements of how the practice of re-ensoulment shows up within an ecology of practices. So imagine the context of like retribalization. So imagine a residency program where people come to stay for a month or 2 months, and they go through in these cohorts with a program, a curriculum of practices, including, as I mentioned, dialogue practices, relational practices, imaginal practices involving what we talked about, the imaginal world, including but not limited to using the imagination, using visualization techniques, um, reflective practices, mindfulness practices, contemplation practices, and embodiment practices, including breath work, ecstatic dance as an example, and very much involving now artistic work, right? The kind of practices that Kishan was already talking about that were actually just part of his upbringing, his way of life. Not only yoga, but also Tai Chi, right? That can allow people to, yeah, inhabit the world in a very different way, right? To live in a very different way. And I just want to say that that's not at all a trivial difference. It's like, no, these are the program of practices that is close to the core of human culture. Humans basically worked out how to do that tribal thing together, and they were running human culture as an engine for love and consciousness, essentially. And it's restoring those kind of practices that can also reconnect us really deeply with the source of aliveness, the source of animation, the source of our souls. And to me, that's what's meaningful and interesting to get up to with it, with the hopeful side effect, right? That it can put a meaningful dent in the metacrisis and meaning crisis in ways that I've talked about elsewhere. Kishan, I'll leave you with the final word. Is there anything else that you want to add here?
I'd say join join these courses whenever you get the chance for full embodiment and letting a little bit go of being too much in the head and be more in the body and really allow to reconnect with the senses, with the senses to nature. All right. Thank you, Sam,
Thank you
for
so much,
this wonderful
Kishan.
call. And yes.